Hey, Ghost Machine fans, this one's for you. Welcome to episode 13 of the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast. We did not have any new releases this week, so we are deep diving once again, and this time it was listener's choice. My name is Nick, and as usual, I am joined by my better half, my special friend, Snoggle. Snoggle, how do you do this fine evening?
My body hurts. I worked a pretty long day today, honestly. And now we're getting to sit down and talk about something that we both really enjoy. So it's a good ending to a long day. And at least I'm sitting down, right?
Yup.
How weird would it be if we did this standing up?
You just shattered the image for the one person out there that envisions us doing this standing up. No, there's probably nobody.
Sorry, fan.
So, as mentioned, it was really neat how, well, it was your idea. So why don't you tell us how we arrived at reading Geiger Ground Zero?
Well, you and I discussed, there's no new comics coming out, so we're either going to have to do this one or that one, and we'll decide later, and I'm like, let's just do a poll.
Because your idea was so fantastic, we got an overwhelming response for one of the two books that we put out there. And the two options, we should clarify. Because on the last episode, I said, we'll make it either Geiger Ground Zero, which is the 2-issue series that we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
That's what ended up winning.
Mm-hmm.
Or I said, The Blizzard from the Image 30th Anniversary series. I then, upon reflection, realized that if one would like to read The Blizzard, while it is really just like 1 to 1.5 issues long total, you would need to go out and purchase 12 issues of that anthology series because they make that story up. Because they have not released the collected edition of that story, which is also has like a subheading, Tales of the Unnamed, which is sweet. That's coming out in like a month, like the first week of August. So it would be more prudent for us to read about it then. So instead I subbed in The Blizzard for Ghost Machine number 1, which is the launch book that we haven't done a deep dive on. And I put that up against Geiger Ground Zero, and Geiger Ground Zero won like almost, I think every vote but 2. And I'd have to go back and look at how many were there. But so yeah, overwhelming victory for the Geiger.
Well, the fans have spoken.
Absolutely. So I'm excited to talk about this era of this character with you. However, we have a shout out.
Excellent.
As usual. And this shout out is for someone that I don't think we've mentioned directly before, but we've mentioned retailers, comic book retailers that are on the Facebook group that are great contributors and like helpful and stuff like that. One of these retailers is Buy Me Toys and Comics in Mishawaka, Indiana.
Waka waka.
Yeah, I like that. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced just like Waka Waka.
Oh, it is. The company I work for has locations there, and we used to call the Mishawaka stores like Waka Waka name.
Oh.
I have no idea why. I'm sure there's a reference out there, and if there is, someone should tell us.
That's funny. Well, maybe Kelly from Buy Me Toys and Comics. Mm-hmm. She's one of the owners.
Oh, nice.
Of the shop. She might be able to help you out with that Waka Waka, I guess.
I think it was just young kids being weird, to be honest.
Yeah, there you go. But Kelly has been in the group since I've been in the group, which isn't even since it was originally started by Adam. But she's been in it since the ongoing series released back, 13 weeks ago now, because it's basically how many episodes we've done, because we released our first one on that launch day, and we recorded it a week before. So she's been there this whole time and seen the group really grow. Her store has, they have some cool, like, exclusive variants and stuff like that. But she's just very communicative. Whenever people have questions, she's always there to answer them. But she also contributes as a fan And you can tell that she's really enthused about the Ghost Machine properties. She's also the store that, if you recall a while back, we mentioned. I don't know if we've mentioned this on the show or if we only did online, but they did a Q&A with the Ghost Machine creators virtually. It was in store. So, like, if you went there that day and you bought a ticket, you could virtually talk to the Ghost Machine people live. They were tuned into the Zoom.
I'm assuming this is the same comic book store that you and I were talking about when we were driving back from Chicago. I didn't understand geography. And I'm like, Mishawaka's on the way home. And it was like 3 hours out of the way. Maybe 4.
Yeah, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. We will definitely swing through Kelly and team at Buy Me Toys and Comics in Mishawaka, Indiana, sometime on our next trip to Michigan, probably.
Oh, yeah, smart.
You know, or there's another member of the Facebook group who contributes a lot, and he lives about 2 hours north of us, and everybody's considering making a pilgrimage at one point to visit them at their store. So who knows? Smart. Yeah, we'll see. But shout out to Kelly. Also, she was recently made an admin of the Facebook group, so congrats to her. Thanks for all your help, Kelly. You're awesome. Next thing we have to do is remain consistent for the rest of you. And how would we remain consistent? How would we remain true to our brand promise right now?
You know, it's funny because in my head, I was not a cheerleader, to be very clear. For my youth just came into my head and it was stop, look, listen. In cheer form, of course. We're about to talk about this book in length, and you need to stop if you haven't read it yet. I will say I highly recommend stop and read it right now. We'll be waiting for you, and you can come back and we'll deep dive together. But we're about to spoil every single panel.
We for sure are.
That's what we do.
So we're talking about Geiger Ground Zero, which is a 2-issue mini-series. There's a couple of significant things that we need to talk about, and it starts with the chronology of both the story and when this was released. So this book, Snoggle, was released in November of 2023. That means that by this time, Geiger 1 through 6 had come out, Geiger 80-Page Giant had come out, Junkyard Joe 1 through 6 had come out, and in October of 2023, 1 month prior to this book coming out, they announced at the New York Comic Con convention that Ghost Machine was going to be a thing. Before that, it was the Mad Ghost, remember, just a couple, like, it was still cool, but it wasn't like, we're going to start a revolution thing, and that's what they said in the New York Comic Con in 2023 in October. So this is 1 month after that. You'll also notice on the cover, it does not say Mad Ghost.
It says the unnamed.
It does say the unnamed. That's very observant of you. That is a common theme of the Mad Ghost unnamed books and these books. However, instead of Mad Ghost, it says
Ghost Machine.
It does. Victory.
Success, I can read.
Yes, great success. So, in November of 2023 was when this came out, and I did not realize this until preparing for this podcast. I didn't realize that it was after that announcement, and that makes this book, I believe, technically the first Ghost Machine book.
It's a good book. It
is. It's super good. So that's the chronology of when it was released in the real world. When does it take place in the story of Tariq Geiger?
Before he finds King or Prince Joffrey. Before all of that. After the bomb and before the incident with the angry prince.
Yes.
Our spoiled brat.
The not yet born or just maybe an infant in this time spoiled brat who later fights Tariq, eventually dying.
I think it says in the last book exactly, like out of this 2 comic series, it does say, now I still think about what he's been doing for X amount of years. I think it was like 20 or 25.
So the bombs go off in 2030, and Geiger Volume 1 takes place in 2050. And if you couldn't hear it, Ghost Machine fans, a really loud firework just went off outside our house.
The Reds are playing. That means they must have won.
Oh, okay.
Or someone hit a home
run. It was
run.
just apt. The Unknown War is 2030. Then Geiger number 1 through 6 takes place in 2050. And this takes place 6 months after the bombs. So this is 2030 or 2031. Well, no, we know it would be 2031 because the bombs, as you aptly pointed out in the beginning, were dropped on July 4th. So 6 months after that would be January, right? So this is January 2031. It takes us to Dr. Molotov in the hazmat suit, who Tariq has alluded to him before, and we've seen him in a couple of we've seen him. We know he exists, and we know he helped them.
Right, and in the current where we're at now, he alludes to almost the fact that he still thinks this dude's alive, which, not to sound crazy, that means he's hella old. He's probably 70 to 80.
Now, or in this time?
Now.
Yeah.
2050 or whatever.
Right.
Not in this time. Or maybe the war just aged him. He's really a spry 25-year-old.
Spry 25-year-old Russian defector.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good information in some of this narrative, though. You do learn a lot about the world via him. So, speaking of that world that is ever-growing and evolving, that it's called The World of the Unnamed, this book was written by Jeff Johns, drawn by Gary Frank, and colored by the incomparable Brad Anderson.
Our letters.
You can say it.
And letters by Rob Lee. The king himself.
You said that. You reminded me of whatever that guy that used to do those serious Hollywood person interviews. It's James Lipton. Tonight with James Lipton. We're interviewing Rob Lee.
The person that Will Ferrell kind of impersonated.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Well, no, he had an SNL.
But then it went to Anchorman.
Yeah,
that's where Ron Burgundy stemmed from.
Yeah, originally from Robert Goulet. Goulet. So written by Jeff Johns, drawn by Gary Frank, colored by Brad Anderson, letters by Rob Lee, the usual crew that we know. There were 3 covers to each issue, so 6 covers total. There were 2 issues. And each of the issues had a 1 for 25 variant, being the 3rd cover in that case. But they were all different. There were no foils or any of that. They were just 3 different visual covers. And most of the covers were done by Gary and Brad. But also Mike Allred did one. And Brian Hitch, the artist and creator of Redcoat, did one. So it is back to this scene where there's the man that used to manage a Walmart. But then we get this lengthy internal monologue from Dr. Molotov where he indicates that he's been separated from his wife. She's a doctor. They got separated. She's in Colorado. He's got to get to her. He's got to get to her. But the only people he could find to help him are some heavily armored goons that used to work at Walmart together. And so it's the best that he can do, but he's got to help them out. And if he's going to help out the Walmart goons, whose leader's name is Salt. Looks like they somehow acquired some gear from some of the other military factions around.
They probably just got it at Walmart.
Well, no, it matches the stuff. It matches the stuff from NORAD or one of those places.
Is such a great beginning to this book because it ties in Junkyard Joe. I'm was there a Junkyard Joe theme park in the works? I have so many questions from just one panel. But they seem to have a pretty extensive operation 6 months after the bomb where they have tunnels and whatnot and tubes putting good air in, a generator. I don't know. I thought this was a good setup to what the world is like 6 months after the bomb. And he does give a very nice description of he's trying to find Lena, where Lena was. And he had been in Las Vegas, which I think is a pretty interesting origin place for him from when everything went to crap. But I like that first panel. It looks like it's dusk in the apocalypse. And you get just a cute little, Junkyard Joe.
Yeah, so you've got me on 2 details there. The first thing where you're talking about the elaborate post-apocalyptic setup is with Junkyard Joe. It's an amusement park, and there's a Junkyard Joe statue out front. And you're right. I totally love that. I love how the layering of the story happens. But there's something else that you pointed out. It didn't occur to me. He just says, I'd been in Las Vegas for an energy conference. Lena was on a plane to meet me. So that means if he was there for that at that time and he was able to survive for whatever reason, then a lot of people that were at that energy conference probably did. Mm-hmm. It's just a thought. I don't have anybody in mind or anything like that. But that's when it becomes clear that his friends, Salt and what's this other guy's name?
Roy.
Salt and Roy. Better than Salt and Pepper. Don't know no scrubs. Well, there's some reason that they believe that he designed the bombs. They've somehow heard that information related to him, which he then later clarifies related to when he's talking to Tariq. So, I'm not saying that justifies the pejoratives that they choose to use, but I think they're literally under the impression that he was party to this.
Yeah.
Somehow. Either way, one of them has tactical armor that has the red diamond on it, which we have seen on other characters in different places. I believe that those are on
Roy.
Well, Roy has the diamond. Salt has the American gear. Those guys aren't really associated with those groups, but they got that gear from those. Like, it's just another layer. Like that, those groups are there, and this is only 6 months after the bombs go off.
What I find sad about, like, whatever has happened in our great country, like, the reason Lena had to leave is because she was safe in a hospital, and then the U.S. Army's like, okay, get out. We have stuff to do here. And that's in Denver. Is that where they went to find that person that Tariq knew?
You mean where Nurse Red was? Mm-hmm. I think that was actually, no, that was in Mexico. But there was a lot of Colorado stuff because NORAD, I believe, is in Colorado. Mm-hmm. Remember, because Joe walked from NORAD to Indiana to get his hat and his uniform, and then
Oh, it does make sense. But it's just kind of like, okay, well, these are citizens, like, and they have specialties, and they're like, hey, get out of here. Mm-hmm. You'll be fine outside.
That made me wonder if there was more that we don't know.
Yeah.
To that part of the story, but
same.
It's an interesting one.
Apparently the Oregon people weren't, like, super prevalent yet. I do believe we see, like, the origins of some of these scavengers and Oregon people very shortly, but
for sure.
It just seems like a crappy move. Like, the Army is supposed to protect its citizens. Mm-hmm. And, like, obviously after something like this happens, just everything goes to crap.
Oh, yeah. And it's on another level as we learn later about how this particular nuclear fallout works.
Yeah.
And so he has a sense of urgency because he feels like he's got to get to his wife and at the Colorado border. And so he's like, the only way I can get there faster is if I kill the glowing man, because that's what these two maniacs want. And in the process, Jeff Johns uses a dialogue between them talking over a campfire about the functions, essentially. It's like this is let's explain the mechanics of Geiger's power aside.
100%.
Type of thing, which is really neat because it's opposite a really great page of one of the, exactly, that's Rob Lee quadruple O, double M, BOOO, quadruple O, double M, boom.
It's a big boom.
It's a big boom.
I
and
like...
That's a Geiger boom. That's a radioactive boom. And then we get to hear, then we get to see their conversation around the campfire that's like, oh yeah, this is why this happens, and this is why he expels the energy, and this is why he absorbs it. And even one of the other characters is like, how do you know? And then he's got a reason. Mm-hmm. And it's neat, because it's like, alright, well, he's going to use that information to try to kill him, quote unquote, as fast as he can, because he needs their help. What do you got to say about this barbecue? Because as you mentioned earlier, there's some flashbacks. This is a flashback all the way to pre-bombs.
Well, first of all, it is zero shock to me that the person who tried to kill Geiger and his family's name was Kyle.
You talking about in the red polo?
Yeah. And she goes, Kyle!
Oh.
I'm just kidding. First of all, we have several friends named
and they're
Kyle.
all super nice.
Yes, we love them.
Not this Kyle, though.
Not that Kyle. Red polo shirt Kyle with a mustache. We don't like you.
And that's not... we have two main Kyles in our life, and neither of them would have the stash. One of them, I would wager they both probably own a red polo. But they wouldn't tuck it in like this guy.
I would bet some solid money on it. That they both own Red Bullets.
So why is he reprehensible? Why don't you
Oh my gosh. He's just like... He, first of all, is openly racist to his neighbor who is clearly sick. The entire neighborhood knows he's sick. Tariq is sweating, still trying to cook them all food at some sort of patriotic barbecue that they're having. And he's just crappy to him.
I believe it is the day the bombs drop. I think it's the 4th of July.
Oh, no, that makes sense. And, like, I love the panel where his wife is like, just smile. They're our neighbors.
Definitely. And it is interesting to see how quickly Kyle takes interest in his fallout shelter by asking questions like, how long could somebody survive down there? We get it. And so the flashbacks keep going back and forth a good bit, and it is good because after you got to this point in the story between the multiple series, you wanted to know a little bit more about what happened right before the bombs. Mm-hmm. And you wanted to know, I would say a little bit more than just a little bit about his powers and how they work and how the vest works and etc. So it's good that these flashbacks happen. Those are the two things we're learning from them.
Absolutely. I also find it interesting that he is searching for Geiger through the desert, like due to his radioactivity levels. And I feel like we just recently read something that like paralleled him to Hulk on the cover. Mm-hmm. And didn't they search for the Hulk because of his something levels?
Yeah, the Hulk's powers come from gamma radiation, and he certainly leaves, I believe, a
gamma trail
of that to some extent wherever he goes. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. You like that hodgepodge explanation? See, guys, I know stuff.
Yeah, that was that variant cover for Geiger 3.
Yeah.
You know lots of wonderful things. Yeah. Absolutely. Made sense why they would do that as an homage.
I do like when they flip back to them searching for him in the desert. His sub-thoughts are, Roy doesn't trust me. He's right not to.
Dr. Molotov is in a pickle. That's for sure. Poor guy. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, you even get to see a quick Junkyard Joe cartoon.
I know.
That's really cool.
I'm really starting to I can't wait to see more Junkyard Joe.
You know what would be wild?
What?
If this got so deep that one day, they made some material for it, they made a couple actual cartoons related to Junkyard Joe because they maybe come out with a show or something, and then they make actual toys, like the plushies and stuff and the viewfinders that you see on Muddy's desk and whatnot. And then eventually, you and I will be in our 80s, and our grandkids or our grandkids will be like, Grandma Snoggle, do you like Junkyard Joe? And we'll be like, what do you mean, sweetheart? That's a old comic book. And they'll be like, no, it's in the Sunday Funnies. And it'll be like the Berenstein Bears or whatever, but Junkyard Joe will become real, and no one will remember us and Ghost Machine.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Did you say Berenstein?
Exactly.
It is Berenstein.
My family
it's
said
not Berenstein.
Stein. My family said Stein.
Apparently.
We don't need to go down that.
I know, but right just it.
I'm just saying it's the same thing. It's enough. You could put enough Junkyard Joe stuff in my office that eventually I would believe it really happened.
Well, one thing I can guarantee is that if they come out with Junkyard Joe paraphernalia, it will be everywhere in the room we're sitting in. I am going to guess 200 plus beautiful figures and whatnot. And we're going to, how they say we're going to need a bigger boat? We're going to need a bigger room.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. I'm kind of playing Tetris at this point to find one more spot, but I also don't do that anymore so much.
But you will if there's Junkyard Joe stuff.
For sure. And one day, the Unnamed will be made by McFarlane Toys. It only makes sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, lots of sad memories of the family. Sadness.
And the dog is sad, and they're like, get better, Dad.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's reading a book with his family. which they obviously do every night, and he loves to read to his kids. Like, he's just all in all, like, a good person. I do like that his son appears to have a Junkyard Joe doll that he sleeps with at night.
See, it's getting more and more real every panel.
I know.
And his son has 2 Junkyard Joe posters on the wall behind his bed. Bam. I don't mean to be flippant. I'm just not super good with the family sad stuff. But I also do love those small details, especially the Junkyard Joe. And to your point, that he is reading with his family, which in the most recent issue of Geiger, he makes a very big point of. Telling Nate is why he won't ever. And then we do see the bombs actually go off. So we do get some clarity that in the moment that the bombs went off, because it's on the TV, just like when we had the radio bit that we did on our very first episode together. That was a lot of fun. When that happens, it's clear that they were in bed together. Tariq and his wife were in bed together, and they were like reading, and then they get the news story, and the bombs go off, and stuff outside starts screeching and crashing in. And then it's kind of neat. I like how, I'm not sure really who would make this decision. I imagine it would be at least Jeff and Gary, but instead of it being like an entire page is the past and an entire page is the present, they start interposing panels to increase the urgency of both events. So back in the desert with Salt and Roy, they're right in front of that amusement park with the big Junkyard Joe statue. Now we get some perspective on that. And then there's a battle where he like goes right through Salt's armor with his melty hands. But then, boom, he's back to Marcus. Marcus has a whole bunch of Junkyard Joe stuff, and he's like, just bring one of your toys. We gotta go. It's emergency.
And I think that's what makes him remember. And it even says he stared at that statue as if he remembered something. Because obviously he's been 6 months just like glowing and exploding throughout the desert.
That's a really good point. So it's, to what degree how long did it take him to...
That's got to make you a little crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he was probably not even fully conscious of himself or his faculties for a while.
Well, in the beginning, he's just like... Rah, rah.
Right.
And even, like, he can almost get the kids. Like, he's remembering it and probably constantly living it. He can barely say Tracy. Like, you can tell it's all bad.
And he burns his first book. He's got the memories. He sees, them going into the shelter. He remembers that. He's regaining his identity. Or, you could say he sees the bomb go off and there's that cool skull in it.
You know what I find really interesting? Okay, in Geiger 3, Junkyard Joe goes home to because he's like remembering himself and remembering who he is. And that's what Geiger's doing right here. He went home to remember because he started to regain memories of who he actually is.
Yeah, you mean because he probably wandered around for a while and then
he's just wandering around, exploding, and then he happened upon the idiots from Walmart. And he sees a Junkyard Joe statue, and it reminds him of his son, because his son loved Junkyard Joe.
Good point. And then he does find that book, that same last book he was reading them. It in flames. Although you'd notice, it's so subtle. Did you notice when he looks at the book for one panel, the flames die down, and it's like the contours of his body look like muscle and flesh? Even though they're still green and illuminated.
Because he can psychologically control it to a degree.
Moment. He can calm down for a minute. And then it comes back and burns the book like so many other ones that we've seen. And then he gets assaulted by Salt's brother.
Well, I have one small thing I want to bring up.
Or no, that's
before
Salt
that.
Trying to avenge his brother.
So before he's like in the house, it goes back to when Kyle and Kyle's wife were trying to get into, which we've seen this before. Kyle and his wife were trying to get into the thing that he made his family, like, shut the door. And the way these panels kind of happened, did the bomb go off right on them? Or did he already somehow explode and kill his neighbors?
My impression is that when we see the panel with Kyle and miserable Mrs. Kyle. I just don't remember her name. It's not worth checking. And he's cocking this shotgun with this great Rob Lee. Then there's like a silhouette of them, and then there's the bomb with the patented Geiger skull in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that means that my impression is the bombs went off in that moment, and they went off all around the country, although that has not been clarified yet. And they happened to be within relative close range to one, and that the effects of that one, or the effects of the fallout of that one, triggered his abilities, which were only triggerable for him because of the experimental cancer treatment he was undergoing.
Okay.
And that's why everybody else just dies. But, to your point, like, whether it was right on top of them or not, it does appear that there are standing structures that endured to some extent.
Right, his house endured.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. So to me, that means it must not have been that close.
Yeah, or
it wouldn't be there.
From what I know about nuclear blast,
right.
It would be gone.
Well, as far as we know, but we also have been told later in this series that Dr. Molotov says that his work was to spread radioactivity. We could find out that the bomb, maybe like the megatons or whatever they call it, wasn't that high, but that because of the spread, we're going to find out.
I guess we'll see. It would have had to have killed Kyle pretty instantly for him not to shotgun Tariq.
Yep. That's a good point. And so he does end up getting attacked by Salt and Molotov.
Idiots.
as Molotov states, it's not going as we planned. He basically...
For my brother! It's like, dude, if you see that there's a thing that a scientist just told you, this is what's happening, he's absorbing all of the radioactivity and expelling it out, why would you think, like, you know what, I know he by touch somehow killed my brother, but I'm gonna go get him. Like, come on.
Yeah, people do wild stuff in an apocalyptic world.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty neat what Rob does with the Geiger counter letters.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're all the same KT. That's just, each one is just KT, KT, KT every time the Geiger counter clicks. But he arranges the clicks in such a way that you can see it like speeding up and speeding up and speeding up as the radioactivity builds.
Mm-hmm.
As Tariq is getting close to like the door, I believe, to his shelter, and then he chooses not to go in there. And it's presumably because he like remembers and his emotions take enough control that, you know, it's like this crescendo of Geiger counters. It's cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then ultimately, Tariq goes back to being full-on fleshy because he realizes, oh, that's where my family is, and he calms down, and it's the end of the first issue. And Molotov is there standing with naked Tariq.
I feel like you're supposed to feel the letters and the sounds.
Oh.
And the FWOOOOM, which I take as it's like a candle being blown out quickly.
Oh.
That's like how that made me feel. And then like the clack, clack, clacking is just like so much lower than what it was before. Because he's like, why is it dark now? He thought he was about to die, so his eyes were closed. He's like, alright, dude's gonna get me. And then that's when he sees Tariq pretty naked.
Oh yeah, for sure. You make a good point though. I would use the word douse.
Yeah.
It's like he's being doused.
Yeah.
Like a flame.
It's awesome.
As it were.
Yeah.
And then it tells us next issue's the conclusion, because this is a 2-issue guy. And that I think it takes place, it picks up right back where we left off. Naked Tariq clutching the door to the shelter. His relationship with Dr. Molotov begins here. And it's interesting, it's kind of neat how we learn about Dr. Molotov's familiarity with radioactivity. It doesn't just go back to, what he's studied in his life. It goes back all the way to his family.
Mm-hmm.
I guess his father worked near Chernobyl and was affected by the radioactivity there. And notices that Tariq starts to get aggressive and he starts like punching the door. And then he transforms all the way back. But he realizes what he wants. He wants his family. He knows his family's in there.
He wants a family again, too.
this is 6 months after the bombs. He's the first person that we see Tariq stop and communicate with. I believe. Like, we've seen him say a few words, like you said a little while ago, like his wife's name, stuff.
Yeah, he still seems confused, though, because he's like, you know who's in there, don't you? And, like, it does some flashback, so he's like, he realizes his family's in there, and he just full on goes lime green. Whoosh. Those letters are fantastic. The piano's fantastic. I love it. It says FWOOOSH. And it blows Molotov away. Not all the way up. Just backwards.
You're right. And it seems like that's it. There's a degree of instability to that. Mm-hmm. So that we know if he goes unregulated, he will build up a radioactive charge and have to expel it, and then he'll reabsorb it again. Mm-hmm. And it seems like perhaps the degree to which he has aggressive or wild emotions or whatever contributes to the veracity of the explosion and maybe the frequency. I don't know. But the point is, in your case, we've seen him like explode and vaporize groups of people. In this case,
right.
He just kind of transforms back for a second and then falls back over.
Yeah. And then Yeah. And then Molotov's like, I do like this entire page because he's just like, where is it? Like, he knows the solution because he can understand what's going on with him. And it does, like, we get the explanation is because he was involved with the bomb. But you gotta think, like, he has seen that man burn people alive with just like a touch and completely make them melt away. And he boldly finds what he needs. And then he just stabs him in the shoulder with it.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty aggressively, too. Like, it went in there like...
Yeah, And he doesn't... It's not as if he needs to complete the mission and kill him so he can go back to the Walmart boys and get the escort to Colorado or whatever. And he doesn't know... I mean, I guess he knows that he can turn him back to some extent, but he doesn't know, like, that he's going to be able to talk to this naked radioactive man and get some help finding his wife.
Right.
It's a rather selfless thing to do for a guy. Like, you would think he'd be like, okay, I'll go find some other people. I'm going to Colorado. And instead he's trying to figure out what's going on and help him.
I do like this panel here where it's just all black because this is my fault. And I feel like that's showing like he has actual very deep remorse. This is my fault. That's why I'm helping you.
Yes. And so that's deep, right? And this is after he does stab him with the rod, which is also the thing that you mentioned he was like looking for. There's like a whole page of him looking for that, which I think is a great way to build the suspense and the urgency of like the character being like, I can't find the thing I need. But when he puts that rod into him, it's just an awesome sound that Rob Lee gives us with these crazy letters. It's SHHLKT. It's such an awesome sound. And then he's chained up to the bed with the rod in, super, like, buff, ready for Mr. Universe. Basically.
Also pretty mad, which who wouldn't be? Like, just perspective. For 6 months, the man has been wandering the desert, kind of like, where am I? And exploding things and feeling a bunch of rage, but it really affected, like, his knowledge of what was going on. He just keeps on exploding over and over and over again. Like, that's gonna drive someone a little crazy. So he's starting to remember, after seeing that statue, like, I need to go home, but he's not quite sure why yet. And then he sees the shelter, and then he knows his family's in there, and it's like he's starting to connect these dots. And he's, like, so angry when he wakes up. And then Molotov asks again, who was in that shelter? Like, I'm trying to help you. And he goes, with, like, rage on his face. And then you can tell he's just defeated. Because it's like he realizes, he's like, oh, God, my wife and kids. And then he says what happened because he doesn't know. He's been raging out for 6 months.
He doesn't know. Is like this one moment where we get some clarity of, are you certain your family survived? I saw them enter the shelter. That's not awesome. But either way, he does decide that his emotions are going to overcome him, and he starts to transform the remainder of his body that he can, because there's only a rod in his shoulder, which does give us some insight into, like, well, he needs a certain amount of boron around to suppress the abilities, but he gets out that door, and it's like, I guess it's Roy? Yeah, still Roy is alive and kicking. And he gets him right through the shoulder, and he sees that vulnerability there, and it's almost like he's a convenience piece for Jeff Johns to let us know, like, oh, okay, just to clarify, guys, he can be harmed if he's not transformed. Okay, next panel, we're going to kill Roy now, because we don't need Roy anymore. Because the last purpose that Roy had to serve was to tell us that Geiger can be wounded if he's not transformed. But it also gives us the really neat opportunity to see, yet again, how far Dr. Molotov will go to help him, because he shoots Roy.
I do like the internal monologue of Molotov here. I believe the men hunting him dead, but Roy had survived the encounter, and they do this a lot. Then you turn the page, and he shoots him through the neck. First of all, good shot, dude, because he knows he has to, like, he can't go for that helmet. Didn't work last time. And then he just says, briefly, I would have liked to think that was the first time I killed a man. And I'm like, excuse me, sir? Who else have you killed?
Good point. It doesn't sound as though he's attributing the bombs to that.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's saying he's killed somebody before.
Probably some things have been a little crazy for 6 months.
Oh, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. There's probably something in there. And then their friendship begins.
Yep.
And just a tad bit of levity, which it kind of needs it at this point.
First things first, let us get you some dents.
Yeah, exactly. See, Ghost Machine fans, when she can finish your sentences, that's when you marry her. All right. Woohoo! And then it's kind of neat. Like, I see this as when we have the show or whatever, or maybe just the reel in my head forever of the origin montage of when he gets his first outfit, like where like Dr. Molotov makes him the best. And I hear music in the background, that's and like stuff like that as it flows, and he's like, and these are the rods that you're gonna do. They're boron. It's kind of like that first time you put them in there, you can see him like, and then his eyes glow. It's pretty neat to me.
You know how I like me a cheesy monster movie and/or about robots, and I think you know where I'm going here. But the music, like at the beginning of Pacific Rim.
Mm-hmm.
Da-na-na-na-na-na. It's like...
Exactly.
Sorry.
It's fantastic.
In the beginning.
Exactly. And then this is in the beginning of Geiger.
Yeah.
There's
so
one...
good.
I've been talking about this next detail since, like, our first episode together. Because you made a point way back in the beginning, like, he is buff. How is he buff after this, happened and everything? And he's talking to Dr. Molotov, because Dr. Molotov's like, you keep looking at yourself in the mirror. And he goes, before I woke up, I was 40 pounds lighter. Cancer wasted me away to nothing. And then Dr. Molotov says, yet it seems your cells have repaired themselves. The cancer is gone or replaced with something else. And that else is italicized and emboldened by Rob. And so it's like, oh my goodness, what's in there? But either way, it's neat, because it's like, okay, but we do know he still has to eat to some extent, because eventually, after so many beans, he eats a pig. And he's got to have sustenance of some kind, so he's not just...
Okay, hear me out.
Whatever.
Hear me out. What if, like, when he goes lime green, he not only, like, absorbs any radioactivity, but if he, like, kills somebody in that scope of things, his body absorbs, like, kind of, like, eats them.
Like their energy or their life force?
Yeah, and that's, like, what kept him, because you gotta think, for 6 months, I don't think as he's, like, exploding and can barely talk, he's like, hold on, let me get a can of beans.
Well, maybe when he's in exploding mode, he doesn't need any sustenance.
That's what I'm saying. He doesn't need it because he gets the energy from the things that his body is expelling that radiation, destroying and taking everything back in.
Mm-hmm.
You feel me?
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I think is happening.
Yeah, fan theories with Snoggle.
It's a great one.
This time. Dig it. Cool. So he gets his rods in there, they're talking about this. We're getting more origin, explanation, scientific-ish, science fiction, more like stuff. But then we also get to learn more about Molotov and the bombs. Because he's like, when you stabbed me with that rod, I asked you why. You said it was because it was your fault. And were you talking about Russia and the war? And he's like, not exactly, but I basically I invented the stuff.
The Scientific Research Institute 1011. And in this panel where he's explaining, like, what he created and says they're about to be in ground zero, again, I would like to just note that the lighting here and the color in this panel is excellent. It is beautiful. It has created a very good light illusion. Even the little red brake lights in the back of this truck, very good. And as they're talking, he feels guilty, and he's like, well, so you see, I created this hell, which means I created you. And as they're still in mid-conversation, it's like you can feel this crash. They get slammed into by a semi. Yeah, and this guy looks pretty insane.
Yeah, post-apocalyptic wild wanderer dude taking trophies.
He has a doll hanging from his belt.
Wearing armor.
It says, you're trespassing, which, first of all, I just need to talk about this details here. Save it, old man. Everyone out here has a sob story. And he has on, like, let's look at some of the details here. I'm pretty sure some sort of, like, hair sewn in or wig on top of his mask, where you've got pink hair, yellow hair, and then red hair, and then, like, a fur coat. And also multiple watches. 1, 2, 3, 4. A couple of rings. A necklace of rings. A polka dot bandana. Like, who is this guy? And a doll hanging from his police belt. It's weird.
You know, I see it as just like someone that would survive in this environment, you know, to this extent in some horrible way. And he's essentially like a lone bandit that kills people and takes their stuff. And that's what he says that he just wants to do, basically. But Molotov goes so far as to assist by, like, tackling the dude and ripping his mask off. Because this is another point where we see, like, even this bandit dude, he's wearing a mask because of the radioactivity. By taking that off, he clearly, like, immediately disarms the guy, and he's like, give me your keys and everything, and he's looking for his keys, like he's literally going to give him the keys to the truck just for the mask, because he knows he's going to die. And then what does Dr. Molotov spot in that moment?
His wife's badge.
His wife's badge. It's so, like, Jeff Johns was like, I'll just put this...
So intense.
Right here. I'll just put this right here.
Like, you can tell in this panel, he's just, tell me, and the urgency. And then right next to it, Bandit Dude is, I warned them to go. And those tears, like, oh, so well done. I gave them a chance, but they wouldn't leave. And in the background, like, Molotov's not even concerned that Tariq's about to, you know, go lime green again. And he's like, I can't hold it back. And then we turn the page and he just shoots him through the head. Like, nope, you're dead.
Molotov shoots the bandit who killed his wife. In the background of which, that shot, Tariq is, like, falling to the ground, kind of looks like he's about to blow again. And keep in mind, he does not have both rods in. That's why that he's under duress. One of them came out. So, it does show us, here's another moment, where Dr. Molotov adds somebody else to his list of people he's killed, apparently. And that's the guy that killed his wife. Then he puts the rod back in and he goes back to normal, and they do travel onward to find the remains of her camp.
So sad, and he finds her. And I find it very interesting that they bury her, and it is a neat detail that on her tombstone, Tariq carves it for him.
Oh, how does he do that?
With his finger.
He does. He does it with his finger.
I just think that's like really, it's just a nice detail.
I have always wondered why it doesn't say Lena. We do see this tombstone a few times in the first series, and it's kind of presented then as a, like, you know, it's when he says too many people have died here. We don't need to bury anybody else here. When the bandits come and he scares them off. Mm-hmm. And then you see that tombstone. So that tombstone's been there for a while.
Yeah, it means they were hanging out in the bunker, or, you know, next to the bunker, in the house together or whatever. Mm. It's interesting because I can see if I'm coming from Tariq's perspective. He's like, well, you got to kill the person who killed your wife. Like, he's trying to protect his family. So he catches like a scavenger or whatever and kills him. And he says, I will do the same to anyone who trespasses on my property. And then they get in a fight, they argue, and he leaves and he's like, and I never look back. 20 years later, every day I wonder what happened to the glowing man. So he still exists at that point, by the way. And now we're 20 years in the future, and we see my beloved Barney with Tariq.
Indeed. And Mind Blown page, the epilogue page, Junkyard Joe. There's so many similarities between this and Geiger 3 that we just read.
Oh, I'm so excited about it. And, you know, I'm not calling you out here, but you had read this before, right? In 2023?
Yeah.
But this was like kind of the beginning of everything.
Yeah.
So it's like the first memory source is, okay, we're Junkyard Joe again. We're remembering what happened in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Then we're remembering what happened in Melody Hills.
Then the next we don't know when that was, because we haven't seen that.
And then the third one, he's remembering Tariq like they were buddies, but we haven't seen that explicitly in any of the books. He's like, Junkyard Joe can help. And this is, you know, Tariq talking to Joe. This man in the middle, which who is it? Because I'm sure you know and I don't.
The Northerner.
The Northerner.
This is the second time he speaks, and I think it's the first time that we see him really clearly. Before this, we've only seen him in the time portal in Junkyard Joe 6.
He goes, he's dangerous, and then you have, of course, Redcoat to the side being like, what fun would this be if he wasn't? Yeah. Just like, it's all certain death, but I live and I persist through everything with my Redcoat that never is not crisp and red. And then there's an error. So memory source, it's like error red. We're going to remove the rod on 3. 1, 2, 3. And then it goes on to the robot waking up. And he's repairing his memory. And Tariq's trying to tell Joe, I know when the war started. And that's when he's like, I need to locate Tariq. So it's like, did this memory where he's like, the unknown war, I know who started it, did this happen before their fight or after it? I have so many questions.
That's, I think, where we're going to get really taken for a ride. Mm-hmm. Because the Northerner is a time traveler.
Yeah. And I like it.
We're not really sure, you know. And the ones that take the rod out, they're like NORAD people that followed up after the battle with Tariq, and they found him with the rod in. They took the rod out. He gets rid of them right off the bat, and he starts walking to Indiana because he doesn't have his shirt on.
Yeah. I wonder if, like, so, you know, they say memory source error. So I feel like that's the reprogramming. Mm-hmm. And his original programming is like, no, I'm going to repair this. And that's when these dudes are like, something's wrong with the robot. We got to call president. And then they get attacked, and he's like, going to get Geiger.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. To be continued.
And what's great is, like, we're right in the middle of that actually happening now.
Yeah.
It was a significant wait when you consider.
Oh, I think I was super excited because fans, I just read this.
Yeah, and just the one other note about Redcoat, and then it's apt that you brought up his coat because we have a listener mail question related to it.
Oh, yeah.
But this panel in Washington, D.C., in Geiger 3 that we just read, the newer ongoing series, Geiger 3, Redcoat in Washington, D.C. looks at Joe and he's like, hey, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's like, you need to go fix this. It's usually my fault, but this time it's not. So you need to go fix it, you hunk of junk, or whatever. He calls him a name. And so whatever that is, whatever event that is occurring at this around, I would assume, the same time as this Washington, D.C. reference.
Yeah, I like it.
I do too.
Every book I read, I fall more in love with these characters in this universe. Like, I know one of the questions has been like, what's your favorite thing and what are you most looking forward to? And it's like, after I read a Redcoat book, I'm like, oh, I can't wait for the next Redcoat. After I read a Geiger book, I'm like, what's going to happen next? And I think it's really exciting. I'm jacked.
I agree.
I'm pumped up.
She even did like an arm flexing motion, Ghost Machine fans. You know what I'm pumped up for?
This fan question?
I'm pumped up for this fan question from Cameron Gill, the Twitter captain. I know it's called X now, but I don't know anybody that calls it that.
We're not calling it X.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. But
sorry, Elon.
He sent us an email. And just as a reminder, Ghost Machine fans, if you would like to send us a comment or a question or a heckle, whatever you want, it's ghostmachinefans@gmail.com to do that. Or you can send us a DM on Instagram at ghostmachinefans. Or you can even record an audio message like Andy did in our last episode and send it over, and we will play it on the episode as long as it's related to Ghost Machine. Cameron wrote to us and said, hi, Ghost Machine fans, podcast, Nick, and your special friend. He says, this is my question. Cameron's a long time Snoggle fan, by the way, since first appearance. Cameron says, do you think we'll ever see Simon wash or have his Redcoat washed in future issues? Because so far as we know, it's the same one he's had since he became immortal. I think this is a serious question, as hygiene is very important. And he also said something super nice and heartfelt. He said, I wanted to say this is very special to me, and I know a lot of other fans as well. I listen to the podcast every week when I walk to work, and I've loved every episode so far. So thank you so much, Cameron. Cameron does man our Twitter account, which he does post all the great stuff that we put on Instagram on Twitter for us as well. And it really helps get the good word out there. So thanks again for that, Cameron. And let's answer your question. It's a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate question, but I would like to say also, in case Cameron and the fans don't know, and I'm pretty sure they do, we're glad that it's special for you guys, but it holds a special place in our hearts as well. Once a week, just getting to sit down together and discuss something that we love and we're excited about. It's fun to do. It's
absolutely fun to do. It takes up time that we don't have, and we'd rather spend it on nothing but. So thanks very much for the feedback. In regards to the coat, I will say we haven't discussed hygiene. We've discussed maintenance and practicality. Because we all have agreed he probably would have had to pack it away for a generation. He smelled. Well, everybody says he smells, no matter what time period.
I wonder if he really does smell, though.
I would assume that he does. He doesn't have a residence. He doesn't have money. But so he's just
constantly being buried.
That's another thing. Yeah, he does get buried a lot.
So it is a fantastic question because he gets buried. It's not like they're taking precious time to put him in a box.
No, not in the cover of the second one.
Yeah, they're just digging him in dirt.
Yeah, and even if he was in a box, he's got to get out of there. That's dirty.
Yeah.
So we do agree that he had to put it away for a while, probably at least a generation, because it was not a great thing to wear around the United States.
Now maybe he just inside-outed it.
There you go. Maybe that's what he did. Even then, though, how do you maintain that, right? Even before we address hygiene. There was a panel in number 2 where he did say...
He sews.
That's what he said. He was like, basically, I've gotten really good at sewing. And that was it. That's what you got. And it was like, okay, all right, that's cool. I'll take it. And, though, purely from, a durability standpoint, I think that's when we were talking about, Dungeons & Dragons rendered items.
Yeah.
Because they're...
Could be.
indestructible or whatever.
He was wearing it.
Well, no, because if he has the ability to sew, then he's had to repair it, which means that it's not invulnerable. Like, no matter how we look, I don't, he's responsible about nothing but making sure he has his coat. That's pretty much what Mike Schwartz said about him, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, because it's showing you who he is.
And maybe, like, okay, I'm gonna nerd out a little bit here. Maybe it's a reminder of who he once was. So it's like part of his actual persona. Like, how long has he been alive? When did it happen?
It happened in 1776, right?
How American of
or
you.
whatever. Like, was
so it had to have been 1776.
No, I think the battle was like 1775.
Right.
Remember, because it was Christmas.
Correct. So it's like, if it was 1775 and we're fast forwarding to 2050, you do the math, like, we don't live that long. So maybe part of it after a while was he just kept it going, so it, like, kind of grounded him as well.
Okay.
Like, I'm sure he could have at some point been like, this is not cool right now. This is not fashionable. He doesn't care.
No.
However, something interesting is, like, at one point in this time traveling friend of his come and get him.
Oh, the Northerner?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's decent, what you're pulling on there.
Uh-huh.
At the same time, I think you're onto something different. And this will hopefully circle back to answer our patient Cameron's question.
You ask one specific question and we start to speculate everything about Redcoat.
So
Simon, he definitely doesn't wash it.
I think that we know that that the Northerner doesn't get like a Redcoat from an earlier era and bring him forward. I think because he's said several times that he's 300 years old. We have seen him interact over time with flashbacks with Annie Oakley, Albert Einstein, multiple people through history. So we know he lived through that.
Right.
But, and he's firmly said that many times. However, I would say that it is entirely possible that perhaps the Northerner, like, after they get chummy, they don't seem real chummy, but if they did, maybe he'd go back and get him, like, fresh Redcoats.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or someone's got magic. Here's another fan theory for you. Now, it's not so far-fetched, because first and foremost, we've got radioactive dudes, two-headed dogs, a time traveler, someone who's immortal, just a list of things. There's obviously some sort of magic going on. I did just read a book, as you guys know I like to do, and in the book, someone could just magic dirt off of people. Just like, oh, no time for a shower, and they would just clean them off with a spell. So maybe someone's doing that for him.
Maybe.
There's absolutely no way that Nick believes that theory.
You hear that, Cameron? I think that's the answer to your question. No, I think it is a valid question, and I think that it does fall within the realm of, it's his superhero outfit. He's got to have it, and this is an environment that's kind of being defined in such a way.
I bet he has one of his ladies wash it.
No, the ladies even say, notice he's stinky and then keep flirting with him. That's what happened when he went to that.
Yeah, but they notice he's stinky, and obviously he's made a couple of them mad, which means things have gone a little bit further.
Well, sure, but he's still stinky. And that's Cameron's question. And we don't have a good answer.
Maybe he's stinky prior, and they wash that coat for him.
And that's it. That's how he gets them every time. You want to wash my coat, dearie?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. But we like
care
the
for a
character.
shower.
Something. Yeah, something. Well, that's one of those that's just like, man, every issue it's like a turn, and you're not sure where it's going to go. So
yeah, I'm excited, though. I really enjoy his character.
And on that note, we do need to point out that on the day this comes out, Redcoat and Rook Exodus, they're both coming out on the day that this episode airs. So, yes, so we're going to separate those.
It's like the 4th of July.
It's really, next week. So next week, when those books come out, we have to go with Rook Exodus first.
Okay.
Because our guest co-host for Redcoat 4, Mike Schwartz, on that first week, when we're going to do Rook with Adam, he's going to be a little too busy signing autographs at Jay and Silent Bob's secret stash in New Jersey, which we're really excited for Mike about in his new book.
Yes!
Armored. Armored 2 just came out. Armored 2 comes out today, the day this podcast releases.
Yes.
So he's just a friend of the show. Also has his own stuff going on, so make sure to tune into all our Redcoat episodes going forward. He's always going to be doing that with us. But that means next time we're talking about Rook Exodus, which seems to have a highly turtle-focused theme. But we'll find out. We'll see.
Turtley.
It'll be totally cowabunga, dude. Snoggle, as usual, I have to ask, do you have anything for the remainder of the episode?
No, I'm very excited for next week.
Absolutely.
Wish I was a time traveler.
Well, today these issues come out, so we can read them, and we can talk about them, and we'll talk about them with everybody else
Yes.
next time on the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast.